In this recording, I want to remind you of something. And you can see that this recording is quite long because I'll be giving illustrations in this remind video. What I'm reminding you of now, I said it before. Even in the remind videos I've been making this year, I said it often. But practice learns you ought to repeat things. Look, if someone has been brainwashed for decades or just for years, don't expect that you mention the truth or the right information a few times and it will stick around. No, you need to repeat it often. And that's what I'm doing in these remind videos. I repeat things that are necessary. Now look, what I'm about to say now, it is quite common sense. It is quite natural and logical when you really think about it. But people often don't look through stuff. People don't look at the bigger picture. That's why I need to say this. Beware when everything starts off good. Now listen carefully when I'm saying it. I'm not saying beware when something starts off good. I'm telling beware when everything starts off good. When everything starts off good in a situation, then most likely something doesn't add up. Why? Simply said, look at it this way. You live in a fallen world where the majority of the people are not in agreement with Christ, so they are in the negative. You live in a world where people operate in denial. Yes, I said it. So in a world like that, there must be bad facts here and there. With a bad fact, I mean things that aren't pleasant, things that maybe are set up, or things that may be dangerous. Why? Because the majority of the world's population does not follow the light of the world, who is Christ. So if they don't follow the light of the world, it means they are in darkness. And in darkness, there's confusion. So in such a world, where the world's population is also hesitant in surrendering to Christ, you have to expect bad facts from time to time. So you cannot expect everything to start off good, whether it's in your job, in your relationships, or in marriage, or in romantic relationships in general, or whether it's in your business or where you decide to live. It doesn't matter. You should expect bad facts. Then Christ himself, the Most High, who knows everything, then he himself said to us that in the world you will have tribulation. He also said that it's impossible that no offense will come. So he made plain there will be tribulation and offense will come. So people taking actions against you, people having wills against you, it will happen. And will be trouble because of it. Christ warned you. He told this to his followers. He was not addressing the world. People in the world that pass their teenage years or in the teenage years already know that in life there will be difficulties. They know it. Now many are in denial. They're looking for escapes, but they know it. But Christ told his followers now that in the world they will have tribulation. He said that offenses will come. He said it. And Christ said that anyone that listens to his words and practices them are like a wise man that built his house on a rock. So when the storms came and the wind, it couldn't break down the house. But Christ also said that anyone that listens to his words and does not agree with them, so doesn't practice them, is like a foolish man that built his house on sand. So when the storms came and the wind, well, it collapsed completely. Now, let me remind you that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So what he says is the truth. He knows everything. There's no darkness in him, so he has no motive to lie. So if Christ said in the world will have tribulation, how can it be that there are people expecting everything to start off good in their lives? That contradicts the report that Christ gave to us. To agree with Christ implies that you agree with his report, that you trust his report. I mean, if there's bad weather outside and you look at the weather forecast and they tell you that there will be some bright days here and there, but overall it will be stormy, what happens? You prepare for those stormy moments. So If you see that there's too much rainfall, you don't go with your car because you realize it will be dangerous on the road. So you rather take the train or other forms of public transportation more secure. What happens? You anticipate based on the report you received. They said it will be some bright days, but overall it will be dark. So if anyone that decides to go outside in their t-shirts, you would look at them and think, dude, are you out of your mind? Haven't you watched the weather forecast? Don't you know that it will be stormy this month with only a few days with sun? So if anyone would ignore the weather forecast, people would look weird at you, and not only that, you will put yourself in danger. But let's say you're outside and suddenly there's heavy rainfall. You're in danger in your own health. So this was an example of the weather forecast. Now the weather forecast is not always 100% accurate. Those are human beings with the technology attempting to predict the future. And there are times they are correct and there are times they're not. But I'm talking about the report of the Holy Spirit now. If he told you that in the world you have tribulation, then don't expect everything to start off good in your life. I'm telling you, don't. This is something you need to unlearn. And I know this is how people operate by default. They want things to start off good. Nobody wants trouble. Nobody wants arguments. Nobody wants quarrels. Nobody wants difficulties. Nobody wants any of that. And that's understandable. It's understandable that you want easy, good outcomes. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but understand you don't live in a righteous world. You don't. So, expecting everything to start up good, well, first of all, ask yourself, is that good outcome that you value good to begin with? Is your definition of good Christ-centered? If not, you're already deceived there also. Okay, I'm going to give parables now. Let's say you have Susie. Susie met Jim. They were in love. There was mutual interest. So it wasn't as if Susie was chasing after Jim. No, there was mutual interest from the start. It was like a spark that, well, the spark went off and, man, they were totally in love, texting each other all the time, meeting with one another. They soon moved in together. Soon they had their first baby. They married, so everything started off good. Then later, in the marriage, suddenly Jim began to call out sick on work, in a sense that he started to avoid going to his job. His boss, who was also good friends with him, realized something didn't add up, because the boss knew Jim is a hard worker and Jim never comes with excuses. Jim never tolerates excuses from anyone. So the boss realized something is wrong here. So one day when Jim arrived at the job, the boss saw that Jim had bruises. And the boss asked him, Jim, what happened to you? Who did this to you? Jim said, oh, well, I just had an accident in the kitchen. Don't worry about it. I'll make up the work I missed when I was sick. Then the boss told him, Jim, I'm not going to allow you to work until you tell me what's going on. Really? And when Jim realized it was serious, Jim confessed. His wife was beating the crap out of him. Yes, that Susie was physically and emotionally abusing the guy. And Jim even confessed that there were times he was even afraid to leave the house. And then the boss said, listen, Jim, you're going to call the police now, and you're going to look for help in a home shelter, because first of all, besides your boss, I'm your friend also, and I don't tolerate this. And secondly, as your employer, I cannot notice this and leave it at this. I would be breaking the law if I would do that. So Jim listened. And, well, it became a big fight in the courthouse, though to the rights of their child. And then Jim asked himself, how did I end up here? Jim was really questioning he was really thinking, what did I do wrong? Jim was not a guy that fell for nonsense. Jim was a guy, he was quite smart. He was quite intelligent. He had 2 master degrees, and at the job he was quite successful. He was asking what he did wrong, why he didn't see it coming. Now listen to me, Jim. Your wife did not turn on you. No, she was always like that. But because everything started off good, you were blinded. And because you were blinded, you did not notice the red flags. Because there were many obvious red flags that you didn't notice. You've been bewitched because everything went so good, went so easy in the beginning. Because this is what you need to understand, folks. When everything starts off good, your brain gets attached to dopamine, and there's another hormone, I forgot the name of it, but there are two hormones that are involved with bonding and with pleasure. And when your brain is overwhelmed by these hormones, your brain gets attached to whatever triggers the flow of these hormones. So you get physically addicted when everything starts off good. And what happens, that rush, that hormonal rush, becomes the default state of how your body operates. That's why you're addicted, but you're not aware you've become addicted. So when everything starts off good, you're happy. After all, you become unconscious because you think it's just how the way things go. So when things begin to fall apart, you begin to ask, why are things falling apart? But your focus is you want the good outcome to be restored. So what you become attached to, that is what you want to preserve. And you don't even ask whether what you become attached to was good to begin with. I mean, how could you think there was anything wrong with what you became attached to? I mean, she was so kind to you. She was loyal to you. She even helped you out. She was faithful. That's what you think. Now, Jim, let me tell you, you missed one big red flag. And the big red flag, the obvious one that you failed to see, was that she often complimented you in an excessive manner. Now, some people give compliments because that's how they relate to others. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But when someone gives you compliments in an excessive manner, I'm telling you, something is wrong. And Jim, haven't you noticed that she often compared you to her exes or to some of her relatives that treat her badly? So she manages them, put them in a dark daylight, I'm saying in a negative light, and she put you in a bright light. And because of that, you felt flattered, you felt appreciated. Now let me tell you, Jim, those compliments were not compliments. No, you were being conditioned how to behave. Because anytime friction would occur in the relationship, your brain would remind you that you were the good guy and you would not like those relatives and those exes. And because you become attached to the rewards that of being this good guy, you automatically want to shut up and get along or fix things. And that is what kept you blinded from noticing what was going on. Everything started off good. But was it really good for you? No. So Jim, it's now that you're in a custody fight for your daughter that you notice what you got involved with years ago. You thought you found your soulmate. You thought you found your partner for life. Someone that suited you. And indeed, you had similar interest, and there was mutual interest also. So it wasn't you pushing her to like you or anything like that. But still, you didn't notice the obvious red flag. Because you were blinded by everything starting off good. Okay, that was a parable about this fictive character Jim that married a narcissistic sociopath, which he thought was a good lady. So apart from this parable, understand this. People that want to trap you, they will always put out a bait. Because without a bait, your attention isn't drawn onto them. Okay, if someone goes fishing, what do? They put the bait on the angle. Before they throw the angle that's attached to the line in the water. If they would just throw some hook in the water, what would happen? The fish that swam would notice the hook, the sharp hook, and the fish would become terrified because he would realize that's a dangerous thing over there. But if you would put bait around the hook and the fish would only notice the bait, the fish would go off at the bait. And once they're on the bait, you pull it up and the fish is finished. That's how fishing operates. Or you throw some bait in the water randomly, and when a lot of fish come at it, you throw your net. And now the fish are trapped in the net. Anyway, you use a bait. And a lot of folks are not aware that people are using a bait on them. There are times you can notice it because it's too obvious, but I'm talking about the times where it's not that obvious. And the moments it's not that obvious when the whole situation, everything starts off so smooth, so good. Now don't get me wrong, something can start off good. That doesn't mean that something is up. But when everything about the situation starts off good, way too good, then ask yourself what's going on. Let's give another example. Let's say you have a guy called Frank, and Frank joins a local church because he noticed the people over here, they treat one another kindly. People have attention for one another. So he joined because he thought there's love here. And he thought love is one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. So these people must be in the Spirit. And look, that small church grew. More people began to attend. But Frank realized that the pastor was preaching the same message every Sunday. There was no growth nor any improvement in his preachings. After 4 years, Frank had enough and he quit going to that church. It was afterwards he found out that that church was a cult, which used the name of Christ to draw people into being good victims. And it was afterwards Frank realized, on a minute, what that man was preaching doesn't add up, not even according to common sense. For example, that preacher told people, folks in the congregation, that had to embrace the emotional vampires in their families because they need to show them love. While scripture made plain that you ought to remove the evil from amongst you. So Frank realized that not only was it a cult, but what they were preaching was quite dangerous. What happened? Everything started off good. People treated each other in love. Well, at least what they consider love according to the world. And because Frank was overwhelmed by this so-called love, he was blinded from seeing the bigger picture. Okay, another example now. Let's say you have certain relatives. Let's keep it a bit closer now. And those relatives, you all went to family meetings, family barbecues. So you thought, well, your family is all right. Of course, some of the people had their issues, but you thought you were from a good home. Then one day you hear that one of your female cousins has gone no contact with all of you. And your uncle, your aunts, your grandparents are talking about it, and they say, well, Jackie is a bit weird. She is blaming us for a lot of stuff. She never takes responsibility for her life. And they've been complaining about her. And because you're family and you have good memories with them, you think, well, probably this Jackie, this cousin of yours, is weird indeed. You take the word for it. Then one day you meet Jackie at the mall. And you ask her, Jackie, why did you cut off contact with us? What happened? Jackie said, I really don't want to talk about it, but then you kept pressing and asking, what did I do wrong? Jackie said, look, you individually didn't do anything wrong. I just need to recover now, and I can't have people that enable my abusers to be in contact with me. And then you hear her talk about abuse, and you ask her, Jackie, what's going on? Abuse what? Then Jackie tells the whole story of how her parents were toxic and her father was one big narcissist bully. Now this shocks you because according to you, her father is a very sympathetic man. A man that often helps with charity. So when you hear his daughter talking about him like that, You were terrified. You were thinking, what is this? Jackie even showed him some bruises on her skin that were caused by her mother when her mother attacked her. And she even revealed how often her father cheated at all of it and how her mother took it on all of them. And after hearing Jackie's story, you asked her, Jackie, why didn't you tell any of us? She revealed, I've spoken about it often with other people in the family. They just shut me down. They don't want to hear it. They are one big happy family together and they want to keep it like that. So they ignore the negative attitude of my father. They even enable him as long as he remains that so-called sympathetic man in the family. They only care about their own relief and their own comfort. The fact that I'm being in danger doesn't concern them at all. According to them, I should be thankful that my parents didn't do any worse and just ignore all the bad effects it had on my health and even pretend it's my own fault as long as the family is kept intact. Well, you know what? Ben, let's say your name is Ben, I don't take it. I don't take it at all. My life is precious. My life is valuable. And if they don't value my life, that includes my well-being, then they should have no part of my life at all. I mean, what they do is unacceptable. It's even a crime according to law. But I reported it a few times, but they managed to paint me as the troubled child that causing trouble. I'm telling you, Ben, I'm done with those people. If you want to keep hanging around them, that's on you. But don't come to me on their behalf and as their lawyer, because I will cut you off also. So after Ben heard this, Ben thought about it. And then afterwards he forgot about it for a while. But then he noticed indeed that the attitude within his family was quite secretive. And he began to notice a lot of holes in the statements of those people. And it's then that Ben woke up and realized what type of people his relatives were. He never noticed it himself, first of all, because he was not the target. And secondly, everything started off good. Everything so-called worked out good. Well, good according to Ben. But it's when he saw through the deception that he realized, hold on a minute. These people are toxic, they're dangerous, they are draining the life out of you, I need to get away from them. And he learned from Jackie's example, he removed himself gradually, so he didn't even notice it, and then he completely cut him off out of his life. In the parable I just gave unto you, this Ben had a choice. Either he got along with the denial of his relatives and he enabled evil and he became responsible for endangering other people because he would be deceiving the outside world by pretending that those people are safe while they're not, or he could do the right thing, that is to disconnect himself slowly from them so he wouldn't participate in their unfruitful works of darkness. That's why I'm telling you, there are some people you better not be involved with. Why? Because those people may be part of a network of relationships that are involved in enabling danger. Yes, there are families, sometimes groups of friends, or churches, or small communities that are involved in enabling danger. Look, I'm not saying that they have to put out the dirty laundry. I mean, that's a saying in Dutch, as if you're bringing out all the dirt and all the dysfunction. I'm not saying they should do that, but at least they need to deal with the dysfunctions so that there is safety. That is their natural obligation. That's their natural responsibility towards others and towards themselves. But let me tell you, there are people that just don't care about their natural responsibilities and their natural obligations. They just want to be left alone. They just want to be relieved. Their own interest is the only thing they care about. They are completely self-centered. They are enablers. And such folks, when you get involved with them, they will draw you in their enabling. They will. They will draw you in their darkness. Because if you're not into their darkness, they throw you out. They're not interested in you. And you know what? That is a good thing. Do not be mistaken. People hide a lot of stuff that shouldn't be hidden. People repress awareness of a lot of bad facts. People enable a lot of stuff, a lot of danger, that if it will come to the light, you'll be shocked. That's why do not let appearances fool you. Just like with Ben's relatives, or with the church Frank attended, or with Jim's relationship. It all appeared well. It all appeared wonderful. But if you would look at the bigger picture, you would notice that something didn't add up. And you wouldn't be able to put your finger on it. That's an expression to say, you wouldn't be able to say directly what doesn't add up, but you will sense that something doesn't add up here, that something is wrong. Well, when you have this with an individual or with something and just won't go away, it means that indeed something doesn't add up. There's another thing you need to know. Some of you may already know this, but I need to repeat it anyway. There are people who are aware of the danger or the mess they're in, but they are too cowardly to leave. Or let me say, they're not willing to let go because they still have false hope that things could become better. But such people who are fully aware of what they're involved in, they don't want you, the outsider, to be aware of what they're enabling. So such people will turn you down, become distant towards you. They'll begin to avoid you, or they'll begin to spread rumors about you so that nobody would pay attention to you. What's going on? They are protecting themselves. Because when you are an individual who's alert, people will sense that you are alert. And if you are an individual that's alert, you will notice things. And some people don't want you to notice what they are involved in because they know very well that what they're involved in isn't anything beautiful. So they can't defend it, they can't give an account for it. So they want you out of their so-called lives so that you won't notice anything. Such people do not want to face themselves. They do not want to be responsible. They want relief. They have this false hope that things could work out if they just try a bit harder. They don't want to see the truth. They don't. That's why I'm telling you also, there are times, what I'm saying, that is the case always if you are a believer, that when people cast you out, it's good for you. Not because you deserve it, but because you're safe now. You're not involved with their toxicity and their enabling. And that is a good thing, because that means that you can't be blamed as a partaker in the wickedness either. You get what I'm saying here? There's one thing I want to add to this. Why do you think that many local authorities are so into putting surveillance cameras out there? Now, a lot of people in the public will say, well, this is against our privacy, they will complain about that. And you can get their point, their side of the story, but when you look at it from the wider perspective and you look at the bigger picture, why would local authorities be so interested in putting surveillance cameras everywhere? Well, not absolutely everywhere, but you get what I'm saying here. Simply said, the government, or let me say those that lead the government, they know how people in the world operate. They know how worldly people are. And they know very well that worldly people will cover up a lot of bad stuff. Conspiracy theorists often focus on the government. What is the government hiding? What is the government up to? Let me tell you, many of those conspiracy theorists they're already deceived because they're distracted. They're so focused on the government and come up with theories what the government may be doing that they don't see clearly that worldly people in general cover up a lot of stuff. Worldly people enable a lot of danger. And if it wasn't for those intrusive authorities, a lot of murders would not have been solved, a lot of crime would not have been reported, and a lot of domestic violence would have continued with deadly consequences. Am I now taking the side of the government? No, I'm just pointing out how things are. Those folks that come with policies that put more cameras out there to surveil the population, they're not dummies. They know very well how worldly people are, how far worldly people are willing to go. Let me tell you, you may disagree with me, but that's on you. It's because there are hidden security cameras today that we can notice much of the violence that's going on, and how much violence people tolerate, and how much evil people keep in existence. In previous ages, when you didn't have cameras, you couldn't record it. So it happened, people may have written about it in some newspaper or in some article or in a book, and that will be it. But because the possibility to record things and to store them exists today, we can see clearly how much wickedness in general worldly people tolerate and put up with, just to be relieved. And I'm telling you, what you can see that's recorded today is just the tip of the iceberg. So how much more is going on that people don't know? So let me get it straight. People complain about the government putting security cameras in the public spaces everywhere. The government doesn't put cameras in people's private homes, they put it in public places. And people become upset with that because of their privacy. So you mean to tell me you're more terrified of a so-called police state, which is run by a handful of people who don't have any direct interest to your life? You're rather afraid of that than of the multitudes of people that persist in the negative and fight for the right to be negative? What? I am not telling you here to embrace the so-called police state. I'm not telling you to do that, because I know the dangers of a police state. So don't get me wrong here. Just look at it bigger. Look at the bigger picture here. In previous ages, when you didn't have surveillance cameras, you didn't have much police forces. What happened if in a village people decided to turn on, let's say there was a girl called Anne, and people in that village, let's say the village had 300 inhabitants, people turned on Anne? Well, they didn't like Anne, they had the reasons for it, nobody could stop them because it's so-called their lives, and if something bad would happen to Anne, how would people know? The local governor is in his residential palace with other politicians doing his daily tasks for the king, and the king is far removed, so they would not be interested in what happens to Anne. But if it came to the light that the girl was killed, now people are frightened in the community, now they want answers, so now the government has to act. And most likely they would have taken a scapegoat and blamed it on so that ease would return in the community. But if the local governor or the king would not have been interested, then, well, people would just have killed Anne and that's it. They could have just denied it. Nobody cared. But let's say 400 years later, when archaeologists are around, they may find the bones of this woman. And they would ask, who was she? Well, today, if you have a village like this, you have social media, you have security cameras, people watch out what they do. They watch their impulses. And Anne, if you notice that the community is turning on her, she can record them, she can put it online, and there would be consequences on those people. So I just want you to look at things from the wider perspective, instead of from your emotions. Worldly people enable a lot of stuff, and they expect you to join them enabling those stuff. That is why Scripture tells us in the New Testament not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. It isn't just talking about marriage and friendships and all of that, it's talking about your way of thinking, your way of relating to stuff. Now listen carefully, I'm not telling you to rely on social media and security cameras and all of that. No, you should rely upon Christ, so that you operate in supernatural power, because that is the only real safety there is. Because even with security cameras and punishments in jail or even execution, that's a death penalty, people still will whatever they will and they get out of hand. Though you can reduce it, to reduce the incidents, people still do it. It's when you walk by faith, supernaturally you can overcome and overrule the powers of violence. That will not be easy, but that's the only way. The other option is paranormal relief, but that itself is a danger. So again, to go back to the beginning of this recording, beware when everything starts off good. You're not paranoid. You're not looking for demons behind every bush, no. You're just being alert, you're being realistic. Well, that's it for now. Agree with Christ and be at peace.